To all, in particular my colleagues, former and current, in our various executives as the Cabinet of South Africa, colleagues who've worked tirelessly to advance and promote the emancipation of women and the achievement of gender equality. I wish in particular to make reference to my colleague, Minister Mapisa Ngakula, who has since her appointment as Minister of Defense advocated for the recognition of women in the maintenance of peace and security on our continent as well as around the world. And she does this not always with great support from powerful countries, which should be giving us far greater support in efforts directed toward peace. Of course, the countries present here are known for the support that they do give. But we need to marshal much more support for Minister Ngakula in her efforts, because it is only through the world joining in the effort for peace in Africa that we will secure the success that we want. So we hope that those who are more powerful than ourselves, who control far greater resources than we do, we hope they will join her in the efforts she's making to ensure that there are mechanisms, structures, and individuals that will ensure that we achieve peace on the African continent. I also wish to recognize the contribution of Minister Nkwana Mashabane as one of the champions of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. And Madam, we recognize you for initiating this work when you were Minister of International Relations and Cooperation. And I'm sure now, as you sit here looking at us, you are happy that there is a legacy, because there can be nothing better for a minister than a legacy. Dear colleagues, distinguished guests, excellencies, our country has actively participated in international platforms aimed at advancing the interests of women, including the historic conference which culminated in the adoption of the Beijing Declaration and the Platform of Action in 1995. Who can forget that occasion? I recall watching Speaker then, Frini Jinwala, climbing those stairs in Beijing, accompanied by Mrs. Winnie Mandela and other comrades. And the fact that a platform of action emerged from there gave us all a sense of this is possible. Equally, in May 2000, we supported the first deliberations of the Women, Peace and Security agenda, which took place in Namibia, and which gave birth to the Windhoek Declaration. Subsequently, as has been said here earlier, during the Namibian presidency of the United Nations Security Council, we witnessed the successful and unanimous adoption of this historic resolution 1325. Over the years, this resolution has drawn international attention to the unrecognized and undervalued contribution of women in preventing war and in peace building. The resolution stressed the importance of women's equal and full participation as active agents in the prevention and resolution of conflicts, in peace building, and in peacekeeping. I have said to my colleagues in the department that indeed we wish to continue to ensure that women play this role. But we believe that their role must go beyond that. And I've said we must stress this on whatever platform we occupy. We want women to be party to the processes after peace has been achieved, because we have noticed that we include women at certain points and then exclude them when power is being exercised. And we are now going to begin to insist that we want to see more women peace envoys. We want to see women participating in constitutional discussions. We want to see women being a visible component in whatever legislative institution emerges from peace processes. So our role is not going to end with training. It is going to look into the heart of what the arrangements are beyond peace, so that women are not excluded. Because we recognize, Chairperson, that on the one hand, the experience of women in armed conflict is very directly linked to their status in society. Paragraph 135 of the Beijing Platform for Action states, while the entire community suffer the consequences of armed conflict and terrorism, women and girls are particularly affected because of their status in society and their gender. On the other hand, we see that the changing nature of the exercise of war, in which civilians are increasingly targeted, has begun to mean that women and children continue to be at the receiving end of armed conflicts. There is no woman who starts a war, but there are millions of women who are victims of war. One of the defining characteristics of contemporary armed conflict is the use of women's bodies as weapons of war through sexual violence and abuse. And women continue to be excluded from playing a role in peace processes and post-conflict processes. Resolution 1325 addresses not only the severe impact of war on women, but also the pivotal role women should play in conflict management, conflict resolution, and sustainable peace. We are committed as South Africa to the implementation in its fullest sense of Resolution 1325, in line with our own history, which illustrates the critical role women play in peace and security in a post-conflict environment. Our government has attempted to be at the forefront of advancing progressive policies and legislation to advance the role of women in society. We have heard of the composition of our executive, the composition of our parliament, and President Ramaphosa's commitment to women's empowerment and gender equality. National action plans, as we adopt them today, are the embodiment of this resolution and serve as tools for countries to implement their commitments to this women, peace and security agenda. We've come a long way since the establishment of the multi-stakeholder National Task Team in 2017. The task team has, over the past few years, conducted critical work in building a foundation towards the adoption of our first National Action Plan. Our work has included consultation with various stakeholders from government, civil society, and academia. I would like to commend all stakeholders for the invaluable contribution they've made to get us to this point. But clearly, given our troubling problems, much more work remains for us to do. All of you would be aware that our country is currently serving as a non-permanent member on the United Nations Security Council. Since the beginning of our tenure on this body, which has a responsibility to maintain international peace and security, we have tried to use our membership to promote the peaceful resolution of conflicts through political dialogue. Furthermore, we are working with other members of the Council in pursuance of the African Union's aspiration, the aspiration 4 that calls for a peaceful and secure Africa. We aim through our membership of the Council to advocate for the African Union's flagship program of silencing the guns by 2020. And I think we as members of civil society need to pay attention to the thematic discussions and the resolutions that are being deliberated upon and adopted by the United Nations Security Council. We need to have one component at least of civil society paying attention to what's the UN actually busy with? Why are there so many conflicts in the world when this body exists? What is the AU doing? How much is it devoting to the achievement of peace? And how can we, as its citizens on the continent, help in achieving peace? Once we pay attention to what resolutions are adopted, to what discussions are being held, we can make our voice more widely heard by indicating we support that resolution or we reject this resolution, and urging our government to take particular postures. We do consider them and we do take a position because we have to. But it'd be great if we all are doing much more work on monitoring what is being discussed. Sometimes I look at the topic and I say to myself, why is civil society quiet on this one? And now and again, there are very active organizations that are monitoring. They have binoculars. They can look into Geneva. They can look into New York. And they get a message to me, Minister Pandor, if you. And then I have to give consideration and we say yay or nay. So I think don't neglect the work that international organizations are doing, because they are shaping the world and they cannot shape it outside of your consideration. So we then will also seek to advance the African Union's silencing the guns. It's going to be difficult. There are many conflicts, and those conflicts don't only involve African interlocutors. Countries outside of Africa are using Africa as a basis for their conflicts. It's taken a different character. It's no longer imperial in the sense of occupation, but it is imperial in the sense of interference. And we must reject this. Another priority which informs our membership of the Council is to champion the Women, Peace and Security agenda. And we hope that you will keep track of the themes we will introduce as part of the agenda we will try to set as South Africa. And certainly Women, Peace and Security will feature as strong thematics for us. What we hope to do as South Africa is to build on our former President Nelson Mandela's legacy of working towards a peaceful, just and prosperous world. We aim as a country to continue playing a role of being a bridge builder, of bringing together divergent perspectives, and we hope of helping to resolve very difficult conflicts with a view to allowing the Council to fulfill its obligation of maintaining international peace and security in line with the UN Charter. The agenda of the Council tends to be dominated by security challenges on the African continent and in the Middle East. South Africa and 2 other African countries are currently serving on the Council. as non-permanent members. It's ourselves, it's Côte d'Ivoire, and Equatorial Guinea. We attempt to ensure we play a constructive role, not only in advancing our own country's national interests, but also in advancing the interests of the continent. And I'm pleased that as 3 African countries, we have found a positive way of working together successfully. And that's been very pleasing for us. We will also have the great honor and privilege of presiding over the rotating presidency of the Council in October this year. We think that this presidency role presents a unique opportunity for South Africa to highlight the issues of women, peace and security on the agenda of the Council, and therefore to maintain momentum on this issue. Our permanent mission at the United Nations is working very closely with our Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, the Executive Director of UN Women, to ensure coordinated programs and themes during that month of October. I'm also informed that UN member states, in coordination with UN Women, are working on a draft resolution on women, peace and security that we hope will be unanimously adopted during our presidency in October. And that will serve as a recognition of the important milestones achieved, while also encouraging member states to redouble their efforts in the arena of women, peace and security. I'm told, Program Director, that there are many member states, at least over 70, that have adopted their national action plans, and that many more are already beginning to implement Resolution 1325. As our Minister of Defense and Military Veterans will outline, our country is making a significant contribution in promoting peace and security around the world. Our men and women in uniform have played an integral and very courageous role in the success of the UN mission in the DRC and the SADC Force Intervention Brigade. We will continue to play this positive role, and we will also endeavor that through partnerships with civil society in South Africa, we reach other women in countries that are in conflict and their own organizations, and begin conversations and actions that will help them to successfully come into peace. As we meet here today, I believe we need to map the way forward for the advancement of this important agenda in our own national context. We need a sense of urgency which will ensure the comprehensive implementation of this important resolution. An implementation that will be structured, that will have clear targets, that will have strong monitoring and evaluation mechanisms. One of the things I hope we might do is perhaps appropriate some lessons on how we conduct public demonstrations, because we cannot proceed with the levels of destruction of public infrastructure that we have in our country. Nor can it be accepted that we should have negative practices such as throwing rubbish on our streets and just encouraging negative practices that do not give honor to legitimate struggles, but actually act against the legitimacy of the issues being raised. I hope that through our implementation, we will set in place a new form of conducting civil protest, because that will also signal our commitment to peace and security. Because, colleagues, when we do not have peace in a protest, the persons most affected are women and children, the very target we wish to provide support to. So as we look to our own context, let's not be afraid to address these difficult matters as well. I would like then, as I move toward conclusion, to remind all of us that as we work towards the international celebrations of several landmarks in 2020, including the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, and the 20th anniversary of the adoption of Resolution 1325, much more work lies ahead. We have to continue until we realize the total emancipation of women, not only in peace and security, but in all spheres in society. We will also enjoy the privilege and honor of chairing the African Union in 2020, as well as presiding over the African peer review mechanism, which we've not all taken as seriously as we should, and the committee of the African heads of state on climate change, where a lot of work needs to be done. All these anniversaries and lead roles should be an opportunity for all of us to redouble our efforts to ensure that women are adequately represented, particularly in peacekeeping and decision-making at both national and international levels. Remember, when we chair the AU, it's not the government or President Ramaphosa chairing the AU, it is South Africa. So you will be chairs of the African Union, and you must act well in that regard.